Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write better fiction. I'm Steve McLean. I'm an aspiring writer.
I'm Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction.
I'm Heather Luby, the managing editor of the Citron Review.
And I'm Maya, a poet and aspiring writer.
All right, very cool. So today we're going to be talking about character archetypes. Aaron, why don't you give us a rundown of where we're drawing from? What archetypes are we looking at, and where did those come from?
I want to look predominantly today at kind of some of the literary archetypes that we see recurring throughout novels and stories and epic poems and things of that nature. But I was talking a little bit with Maya about this before the show even started. She's much smarter than me, especially in regards to this. So I have like this very kind of basic type of a list that I pull from. But Maya, I thought, if you don't mind, kind of just give us a quick rundown on what exactly archetypes are and why they're so effective in literature.
Okay, well, archetypes, the term was really coined by Carl Jung. A few years before he was acquainted with Freud, he was a psychiatrist, and he kept having patients that were considered incurable, and they all had similar dreams. And he had a really strong basis in mythology and in his education, and so he recognized that some of the symbolism that they were dreaming about were symbols that also occurred in mythology. And so he pretty much spent his whole life looking at how certain things in the quote-unquote collective unconscious through cross-culture are similar among all people, and these are things that people tend to have really strong emotional reactions to. They either get really excited, they get really angry, they want to kill you, they want to love you. These are just basic things that are the same across culture, and because they have such strong emotional reactions, they tend to be things that we use in art and literature, both exploring, but also if you use them in slightly different ways, you can help provoke a reaction in your audience. They have power.
You've described about all of the reactions that I got today at work.
Well, could say something, but I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the reasons why we have those strong reactions is because we are recognizing those archetypes in other people as archetypes that we ourselves have. So if you have a problem with a specific archetype and you see that being reflected in another person, they can make you really angry, or they can make you really happy.
Right.
So let's take a look at like some of these examples, understanding that these are things. One thing that I like that you said, Maya, is that they transcend culture, and that regardless of the culture, or rather, more accurately, each culture has kind of their own version, their own tale of these, looking all the way back to Greek and Roman mythology, etc. And you can see these not only throughout religion, but also in literature and cultural stories and things of that nature. So if we're just kind of looking at some of the basic ones, there's a great video out there that I recommend. It's called Star Wars: The Legacy Revealed.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
yeah, if you get a chance to watch that, it's a great documentary. It just goes through all of the archetypes that Lucas drew on, and you wonder, why is Star Wars so successful? It's because it's so heavily influenced by these archetypes. So I generally use kind of the Star Wars model to explain some of these, but I want to give some other examples as well. But the first one is the hero, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Usually this is somebody who's going kind of on a quest. Heather, did you want to talk a little bit about the hero?
Well, I think that it's probably the most recognizable of the archetypes. That whether anyone is specifically calling it an archetype or not, I mean, the hero is the most recognizable character, so to speak, and pretty much all of the, certainly fiction, which is what my specialty is, that you would find there. Ultimately, a hero is a character, right, who is out there to fulfill a necessary task. And that might have been different things depending on the story, right? I recently read a book called Crooked Letter, right? And the hero of the books, their task, right, was to restore sort of justice and reunite the community. A hero character is one who typically experiences sort of an initiation, who sort of goes through what you might call a community or cultural ritual. Often he or she will then embody characteristics of other archetypes. So the hero is the hero archetype, but can also be embody characteristics of other archetypes as well.
Yeah, that's something I think we kind of noticed when we were going through this the first time, Aaron, is that some of these actually really tie in a lot. And even though they're all pulled out and separated, you can actually have one character, to take on multiple aspects of the archetypes here. I really
And
like
that's
in the
important.
notes. I really like in the notes how it says that the hero may restore fertility. I don't know what that means really, but
Well, that's a topic for another show, Steve. So
Well, they're not speaking. I'm just going to jump in here
Please do.
because when you say that they may restore fertility, restoring fertility isn't necessarily, that kind of fertility. Fertility
I'm just messing
in
around.
land, fertility for a community, fertility, food, shelter. Those are all things that will promote fertility. One thing that I think a lot of modern culture forgets is that all these archetypes have positive traits and they also have a shadow side. And when you have a hero that is doing something good, but you're able to express that shadow side, they become very interesting.
Yeah, truly.
and
That gives a character multiple dimensions and makes them a lot
exactly.
more, yeah,
It gives them some
relatable as
depth.
well.
Yeah. So you've
Uh,
got heroes who have some sort of flaw, some sort of shortcoming, and you also have some villains who have some positive things. And that dimensionality, I think, is one of those archetypes because humanity is a complex species. And very rarely do you find. See, we talk about archetypes without stereotypes. This is the idea of a stereotype is going to be kind of like, to borrow Steve's term again, evil for evil's sake, with very little motivation. It's just somebody fulfilling a role. Whereas in good literature, our hero is not the hero because they're the hero. They're the hero because they're undertaking this important quest. They are the one who's selected. They may not want to undertake or undergo this initiation process or whatever the case may be, but somehow the thrust of it is such that there is no way kind of to escape it, and they've got to embark on this journey, which is another archetype, kind of the quest and or the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a story archetype, right?
Yeah.
Overall story archetype. And then, branching out and getting into this a little bit more, one of the things that we have on the list is this reminds me of the Robert Jordan series, where you've got a young person from the provinces. That's
Mhm.
actually the name of this archetype. It's where, this person is usually taken away as an infant and then raised by strangers or wolves, whatever.
Sure.
And then he or she later returns home as a stranger and able to recognize new problems and new solutions. That right there, I mean, that characterizes Luke Skywalker. That characterizes Rand al'Thor from the Wheel of Time series, and I think that really embodies a lot of stories that are out there, where you've got the young person who doesn't always know exactly who they are or where they came from, but something about them, something about who they are, gives them the ability to unlock the secrets and solve the problems and become the hero.
It's also sort of biblical as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, I would venture to say all the archetypes are represented in all the religions. I mean, that's one of the things that Jung was really looking at, was that they're in all of us. There are certain things in the Bible that are on every single other religion on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you're speaking of, the leaving and the coming back, what gets me excited, because that is an archetype, that is a concept. I'm going to call it a concept because I am resisting calling that an archetype because it's technically not. But that is a concept that is really common in literature because of the fear of the other. We always have a fear of the other because that helps bond the unit, the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
And by sending a child away, suddenly they become the other, and then they come back. So you're having to accept that other for benefit of the tribe, And that touches all kinds of emotional triggers, and you can really, really play with that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's a powerful storytelling technique, definitely. I can see. It's cool that just in the archetype itself, you will already have conflict to start with, to start working with, to develop story.
And that's a good place. That's one of the reasons that we wanted to look at this. We did this, man, Steve, when we started this almost a year ago.
Yeah.
We're racing up on a full year. We're gonna have to do some crazy sort of anniversary special, like take a week off or something crazy like that. You know what I'm saying? But one of the things that we were saying is these are great for figuring your story out. When you first start off, what's my story going to be like? What's going to happen in my novel? Take a look at some of these and ask yourself which of your characters fit these roles, and in what ways do they challenge these roles, and in what ways do they not quite necessarily fit in specifically. But you don't want to stereotype it and just borrow, oh, this is a hero, they're going to be just as bland kind of a hero. In what ways is this hero unique from all the other heroes? Specifically, go ahead, Heather, you're going to say something?
I was just going to say that, yeah, you can think about that in terms of your own writing when you're setting down to start a piece, for instance. But I always find that for me it's helpful, and I encourage students that I have to actually go back into pieces of literature that they've connected with, that they love, the type of books that they want to write, and actually identify, if they can, what archetypes are present. It's a way of sort of studying, right? They're reading like a writer, of studying a piece and trying to identify what archetypes these characters could have represented. And as you said, how did the author use that archetype? And what ways did they subvert it? In what ways did they reinforce it? And you study a piece of writing that you admire and dissect it in that manner. And I think it really helps give you a better sense of how archetypes are used in literature than maybe just trying to sit down and think, okay, how am I going to tag my characters? Oh, this one's the hero, and this one's a mentor, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually completely agree with Heather, and I would go a step further, because I would never go into a story trying to decide what archetype I was going to work with. That's like writing a poem and trying to decide what symbolism you're going to use in advance. These are human concepts, so they're going to pop up in your writing whenever you're emotionally involved in it. So what I would do is study it in other art and literature, and then when I'm writing on my own, make note of when I'm writing, what am I feeling? If it's an emotional scene, then I'm touching an archetype in some way. If I'm bored or feeling bland, I know that I'm not really touching anything that's going to interest anybody. And those are scenes that I'm going to say, okay, what am I missing here? In what way is this archetype not working? In what way am I completely, doing something boring? Do I need to pull something from a dream? Dreams, quote unquote, are archetypes. So that's how I would use archetypes. I wouldn't actually go into
really good point. That's a really good point. When you're going to write a sentence, you don't start by graphing a sentence and then pulling the sentence from the graph and then plugging it in. You write the sentence, and then people later on, for reasons unknown, come along and decide to pull out the verb and the direct object and whatever else they want to pull out, and then they put it in a little graph and torture children and force them to do the same thing.
I wish I'd been tortured in that way. My writing would be so much easier.
Yeah, well, let me just tell you, I'm traumatized and scarred emotionally from it. But anyway, what you're talking about is don't overthink it. You have to write it in the first place, and then you can go back and analyze it. And when you recognize the archetype that you naturally put in, then you can take that knowledge and compare it with other archetypes of the same type and draw from those lessons that you could possibly apply to your own to make it richer, to make it better, that sort of thing. But to go into it with the idea that you're going to essentially design your story before it's even materialized properly, that's the kind of overthinking that will get people in trouble.
It seems to me, Steve, that we might be converting you to being a discovery writer when you start making statements like that.
No.
Join the dark side.
Back off.
It's
Join
okay.
the
I'm not a
discovery
discovery
side.
writer anymore. I'm a recovered discovery writer. I got you now.
Good. Okay, thank you.
A
Thank-
recovered discovery
I
writer?
feel
Yes.
kind of like the outcast here.
Where, oh, look at that. See that? The outcast? See what we're going on here. We just kind of skipped
You
over
know what, though?
mentors.
Since we're in a safe place here, I will make a statement that I might have made an outline this morning.
Really? Really?
It's like I don't even
And
know
how
you,
do you
Heather.
feel about that?
Welcome to the light side.
Tell me
Very
about your
loose.
college professor.
Very, very loosely. Mainly it's
Well,
because
hey.
I think I have ADHD and I was afraid that I would jumble it in my head if I didn't
know-
get it out on paper.
You know,
There you go.
we're kind of jumping a different rail here, but I'll just say this real quick. I think each of us is some mix of outliner versus discovery writer, and I think that's fine. We just have to find the balance.
Truly.
And as we say with the sliding, I mean, if you want to think of it like a scale, I'm 90% discovery, 10%, outliner, whatever the case may be, planner, whatnot. These archetypes, I think, can
Okay,
kinda
you
serve
froze.
as-
I'm going
as
to
the
go here.
bones.
The
Okay.
okay. Can everybody hear me?
Sorry,
Yep,
you,
I was
you
just
froze
gonna
up
say-
right there.
Outliner and discovery writer are represented by archetypes. Hey, just to get us back on topic. The anima,
yay.
the animus, the fool, and the emperor. Like, tarot is all archetypes. You've got the person that is open and free and curious and foolish and wanting to make mistakes and tripping over themselves and finding jewels in the dirt. And then you've got the person that is a planner. He's a father figure. He wants it to turn out right. He's going to protect you. He lays it all out and makes it organized. Archetypes.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Not on our list, but that's okay, because this is why we brought you on, Maya, is because our list is not as comprehensive as yours. So, but we do have mentors. One of the interesting things about mentors is they often take a different shape. If you think of Yoda, and who is it that mentored Hercules? That little satyr or whatever it was. Anyone help me out?
I didn't hear you.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
Did it
yeah,
cut
we
out?
can hear you. I just don't know the answer.
Oh, Steve, I'm just gonna blame that on you. I never saw Hercules, but I guess they had the satyr. He had a satyr mentor or something. I don't know, but they often will take a shape that is kind of challenges the hero that they're not used to seeing. Other ones, other archetypes that you've seen.
I
that
got to say that the mentor archetype is one of the things that a lot of writers consider to be a trope, where they have kind of like the mentor figure. A lot of it's actually in the writing community they refer to it a lot of times as the magical black man.
Yeah.
Where they toss in like Will Smith to be a traveling mentor of some kind, and or they have a mentor figure who is helping out our main hero, and they have a lot of wisdom and they have a lot of insight, but then suddenly they are dead, and now it's up to the hero to prove him or herself capable of rising to the task.
Are you talking about Uncle Ben?
Right.
Right. In Spider-Man.
Right.
That
Yeah.
whole thing. The death
I mean,
of
it's
the mentor.
completely common, and I mean, this is why they're called archetypes, right? But I mean, I'm sure we could all pop off examples, especially from comic books, and I mean, Alfred to Batman, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Uncle
Right.
Ben to Spider-Man, Dumbledore to Harry Potter. I mean, we.
Yeah.
Well, it's like going back to the Star Wars thing, because Luke Skywalker, George Lucas really did it all. You have Yoda who's there and he's lending insights and he's teaching Luke and he's showing him how to use the Force, and then Yoda dies. That cute little frogman passes away.
Yeah. And I cried for 3.5 days. After that, I will say that mentor is one of those archetypes that I think, Steve, you're kind of alluding to this, that often becomes very stereotypical.
Yes,
and
that is what I was saying.
Yeah, so they just basically, I need a mentor here, I'm just going to plug somebody in.
Right.
and that can be problematic. And another one like the devil figure, I think that's another one where we get kind of this stereotypical kind of a thing. If you think of Lucas's film, you think of Darth Vader, the devil figure, or you might say the evil figure with the ultimately good heart, the one who kind of comes around. The thing that made Darth Vader kind of cool is not only was he, creepy and scary and powerful, but he was also trying to kill his son, which is kind of weird, but then he was trying to get his son to join him, so we've got some father-son tensions going on, and that really kind of, I think, changed the dynamic of the entire series. And that, you think of that pivotal line, "I am your father," and then that great scene with Mark Hamill saying "No,"
that was a great scene.
Fantastic, live in cinematic history forever.
Yeah.
But it changed the course of the entire series, and it kind of pivoted around that one point, because now we've got some more complexity with Darth Vader.
I would say in one capacity or the other, right? You always have to have some type of devil figure in fiction, because if the devil figure is the main thing that opposes the hero and his or her quest, I mean, to have compelling fiction, there has to be, whether it's in the form of a person or a circumstance or etc., but there has to be something that is opposing the quest from your character getting what they want. And if it's a person, it's going to embody the evil figure, the devil figure, like you said, the evil figure with the ultimately good heart. However that character manifests, they are the foil, so to speak, to your protagonist.
But then you have to be careful of the trap that your antagonist becomes this convenient tool only to oppose the hero, and that seems to be okay. So like in Austin Powers, when we have
Dr. Evil.
Dr. Evil's purpose, right? Dr. Evil's purpose is he's just there to be evil. Right? I mean, that's all he's about. He's just there because he has to be evil, and
it's almost like it's his name.
It's almost like it's a comedy.
It's almost like let's be serious here. It's almost like they intended for him to be, this melodramatic figure. And I know they're trying to create a serious antagonist in this movie. I can't do it, but anyway, evil for evil's sake, and basically your antagonist becomes completely dependent upon your hero and what your hero's goals are for his existence, and that's all he's tied to is just to resist your hero, so that way your hero has something to move the story along. That's when you've got this two-dimensional antagonist that's only there for the purpose of the flimsy purpose of furthering the story.
Right.
See, now I'm passionate about this because, like right now, I'm writing a book about a guy who starts out good and transitions, much like Lex Luthor, from good to evil. Did anyone else watch Smallville?
Extra points for the Lex Luthor reference, by the way. So
you're welcome.
Yeah, I watched Smallville for a while.
Anyone else? Just me and Aaron?
Cultural references go over my head.
Yeah, okay. Smallville was a show where it's Clark Kent before he becomes Superman.
As a teenager, right?
Right, and Lex Luthor, and it's one of those like very corny shows that I still watched like every episode of.
Hey, I've still watched every episode of Supernatural that has ever aired on the CW.
Yes. Very similar.
What is it, like 8-9 seasons now? I mean, a big chunk of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did watch every episode of Lost. I say that with a little bit of shame, but
I did too.
First season was incredible, and then it got a little bit derailed, kind of like this podcast. So moving back into Archetypes here. Let me ask this rather than just going down the list. I'll put a link to this list, this kind of basic outline that we have here that we're looking at. I'll put a link in the show notes. But let me ask you guys, what would you say are the most impactful kind of archetypes that you've seen in literature, or perhaps the most the best example that you've seen of one of these archetypes that's really kind of resonated with you and stuck with you for some reason? Anyone want to jump in there? I'm just going to throw that out there. Unplanned question. No time to think about it. I need answers now.
I think that's gonna be one of the most.
Well, here I have one for you, honestly, and it's because I just finished this book. So I read the book Crooked Letter by Tom Franklin. It's a fantastic piece of sort of rural, right, noir, country noir, however, hick lit, whatever you want to call it.
Did you say hick lit?
I did. And I made that up, I think, on my own. I'm not sure I've heard that elsewhere. But
I'm coining that phrase and stealing it.
So, basically, the main character in this novel, and that I found completely compelling, was the archetype of the outcast, right? A person who is pretty much banished from the community for a crime. And in this case, spoiler alert, one that he did not commit. And he's basically led this entirely lonesome, isolated life because people imagine that he committed a crime that he in fact did not commit. He has had no real friends, and in the end, you really feel like it's going to end really tragically for him because of his deep desire for a friend. He is almost involved or blamed for a second crime that he didn't commit. He's almost kind of framed for it, basically because he is so lonesome that he lets others take advantage of him. It was an incredibly moving story. And even if I recognize right from the beginning that this main character was the archetype of like the outcast, I was so compelled and moved by him. And I thought it was really great to write a whole novel that sort of centered around a person that was banished from this community that was in fact a little weird, and you weren't sure that you didn't necessarily blame the community. Anyway, it was just a fantastic story, and so I could recognize right off that Larry in the novel was the outcast, and the novel was phenomenal. I recommend it to anyone. Crooked Letter by Tom Franklin.
Very good. That brings to mind, speaking of an outcast, a book that I read cover to cover, loved the book, and I've seen the play now 5-6 times, and the wife and I are going to go see it again in August, and that is Les Miserables. Jean Valjean spends his entire existence as essentially an outcast who's attempting to redeem himself and make up for the wrong that he had made way back when he had to steal a loaf of bread to feed his family. And it starts out as being the outcast, and virtually the entire story he's kind of misunderstood, and you never really get a good picture of. No one ever gets a really good picture of who he is until the very end. Good. Also good book. I recommend that.
For me, I actually had to go get it because I want everyone to see what this book looks like. It is amazing. It's called Let Me In by John Lindqvist. It is I would consider it literary horror. Horror is notorious for using archetypes because it creates so much emotion. That's what you use to get people afraid. And this one in particular really messes with them. Spoiler, it's about a little girl who's a vampire and a boy who's a bullied child, and they become friends. They did make a movie, and I won't even the Swedish movie is good. I won't look at the American one, but in the book in particular, what's very interesting is we have a strong pull to the archetype of the child, and in this case, we have an innocent child who is angry and is acting out. And then we have a child that is truly dangerous, but we want to protect that child because we have that archetype of the child, right? It's in our head. Children aren't evil, but here's a child who's evil. And who protects this child? She can't go through life on her own. She's a child. Society is going to notice this little girl living by herself. So who does she get to take care of her? She gets a father, okay? Who's the perfect person to take care of a little girl who will never grow up and who has no genitals? A pedophile.
Hmm.
This book messes with you. As you're reading it, there are points where you're like, oh my god, 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 throughout the entire book.
Really? I
Yeah,
get,
and
it's like,
it twists the archetypes. It totally twists them.
did you ever read the Anne Rice Chronicles, the Vampire Chronicles
Yeah.
by Anne Rice? Yeah. At a certain point in Interview with the Vampire, a little girl is turned into a vampire, and
She's
holy
never
cow,
evil.
yeah,
She's
she
always
is.
kind of good in there. I mean, she has edge, but she's not like truly like nasty.
Yeah.
At least in my
But
opinion,
I
she
mean,
doesn't.
you want to talk about something that messes with you. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, very cool, very very good recommendation. Aaron, you're the one who sprung this question on us.
Yeah.
What's your thought?
Yeah.
I have no answer.
That is the
I
key, right? If you ask the question, you don't have to answer it.
Right.
That's right.
I don't like that rule.
What is that? I thought we established that last week when I wasn't here. So, yeah, I'm going to go with one of the. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read this. It's a pretty high literary kind of a series, a high concept series, very literary and austere, and it's called Harry Potter. And
What's it
so
called?
it's called
I
Harry
don't think I've ever heard of it.
Potter. Yeah, not Perry Hotter.
Is it about a guy who like does potting of plants and he's very
Yeah.
hairy?
Yes, that's exactly right. So I didn't read that series for years until after, cause I wanted to wait until it
Yeah,
wasn't
I think
popular.
you read it after me. Yeah.
Yeah, I probably did. So, but Rowling does a really good job of taking archetypes, but making them very accessible and making them feel very real. She does a great job of blending the kind of the imagination and this magical place, this magical school, with real elements from our world, and the fact that kids still hate homework and they're writing, essays that are not measured by words but by, the thickness of the pages that they have to turn in and stuff like that. But Harry Potter, very clear example of the hero fighting against Voldemort. Oops, I shouldn't say his name. Very clearly the devil figure. It's not even the devil figure with the ultimately good heart. It's just a devil figure, evil for evil's sake, and all of that. But it's very archetypical in the way that it's set up, but it's carried out, I thought, very well over the course of 7 books,
Clever.
which is a very tough thing to do. So, yeah, I would say, I know it's pretty popular and it doesn't show off my literary knowledge, but you guys are all
I
like,
think it's something a lot of listeners would be able to relate to, though, as well. I mean, it's obviously very widely read.
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's why I
Sometimes
picked
you
it.
guys talk
That's
about-
why I picked it.
Sometimes you guys talk about all the really obscure literature, and I'm like, yeah. I feel like Joey on Friends. You remember? I was just like,
The point is
Right.
mood. Like
Right.
a cow's opinion. It doesn't
Yes.
matter.
It's a
Right.
moo point. It's like what a cat would say. Good times.
Yeah.
So,
hey,
All
Aaron,
right.
let me ask you a question, man. So in your book, The
only if you
Bargain,
answer it.
how would you characterize your main character? What archetype is he? Yeah.
I'm going through the list here. I would have to say maybe the young person from the provinces, and it's tough to really kind of put him into a particular role. You could say he's the hero / young person from the provinces. He's not exactly young. I mean, he's married, but he's definitely not old. But in the sense that he comes from someplace else and he's in this town, this completely unfamiliar town. He's never met anybody in this town, so he's kind of out of his element. So I guess in that way, he becomes kind of the young person from the provinces, even though he's not like stolen from his home. He leaves with his wife. He's still in an unfamiliar place and having to figure out how things work in this town that is like no other town that he's ever been in.
Yeah, interesting. I also would maybe call him like an initiate, just based on this list, because he has to go through a trial and a whole lot of stuff in order to actually be initiated into this new knowledge and new understanding of what he's getting himself into. that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
It's
I don't
funny
think
that you
the
mentioned the
archetypes are
initiate.
always.
I saw that earlier and was thinking that archetype is present in every sports movie ever made.
Yeah. Right.
And it's usually in the form of a montage. Someone's
Yeah.
carrying like tires, is like running in the snow. I can see Rocky in my head.
Right.
You've got the mentor out there, the coach, the hard-nosed coach, no nonsense. Yeah.
And usually a temptress figure as
Hmm.
well. I think that that's one that I see in film consistently. I'm pretty sure always if there is a woman in a sort of male-driven plot action thriller, which I love by the way, usually the woman's gonna mess things up. I always think if I see Sharon Stone, for instance, like you think of Casino, right? You know, like oh well, this is what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Venus
You
and
can see.
Athena.
What's
Yeah.
that?
I said Venus and Athena.
Hmm. Yeah, and
When you're talking about the female goddesses, there's always one that's causing problems.
well, and it's like
Yeah.
Calypso, right? With
And the
Odysseus.
sirens, right? You think of the
Mhm.
sirens in the
Yeah.
Odyssey.
hmm One thing I wanted to touch on that we hadn't touched on as far as archetypes is because we as writers are human beings, we have our own archetypes that we're constantly struggling with, and they tend to come out in making really formulaic books that are all the same story over and over and over. But if you're aware that you have a certain thing that tends to show up in your writing, you can make sure that each time you write it's a little bit different or it comes out a little bit different way.
In challenging yourself, in kind of this idea of you want to look at your novel and find out what archetypes are naturally developing and perhaps encouraging those a little bit. You also want to find out like which of your characters is becoming the stereotype and how can you deepen
Yeah.
those
But that
and
isn't,
challenge those.
I was thinking more along the line of you have bad daddies. Um, and if you know that that tends to come up, you can avoid that, and you can make sure that your books have a little bit more variety from one another.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kind of goes back to, writing out what it is and then recognizing the archetype afterward. And if you're familiar with your own writing style and you're familiar with what you tend toward, then you can take a more calculated approach to it in the beginning, so that you know that you can avoid the tropes and hone in on maybe something a little bit more meaty and more depth.
I like that the last one on this list, it says the creature of nightmare, the monster, physical or abstract, that is summoned from the deepest, darkest parts, right, of the human psyche, that threatens the lives of the hero. I find this interesting because I know, Aaron, you had graduated from Antioch by the time I did, but my senior lecture was actually on monsters and their prevalence in literature and the purpose that they serve, and studying the archetype of the monster, throughout history. Obviously, not just in fiction and literature, but in all forms of art and culture.
Yeah, that's
That's
an interesting thought.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool. Like, what did you discover about it, or what did you focus on with that?
Well, I'm trying to remember now, right? Gosh, how many years has this been? 4 years ago that I did this paper. But mostly this archetype appears everywhere. As we were talking about, as Maya was talking about earlier, it doesn't matter, religion, it doesn't matter what part of the world. There are versions and forms of the monster that appear in all types of art, as far back as we have any record, because it is a basic human need, I think, to create a monster, or as Maya said earlier, even an other, right, to fear. And I think that's why you see it so prevalent in all types of art, especially, again, being a fiction writer, being able to identify it in fiction as well. I think it's almost like a necessity, and that people can recognize that in the things that they read, at least in terms of it being something that they find compelling.
Well said. Well
And
said.
just so, and of course, monster isn't necessarily, right, that you're writing horror. It is whatever represents the other or something that is from that deep, dark part of even the human condition.
Mm. Absolutely. Well, I think we're running up on time here, so do you guys have anything else to add before we start signing off?
This is a monster of a podcast right there.
Heyo. Well played, Steve. Anybody else?
Hey, by the way, just to let you know, my brother-in-law has been texting me. My brother-in-law, his name is also Stephen, and he would like to say hello to everyone. Because I told him,
Hello.
dude, I'm in the middle of my podcast right now. Don't interrupt it. We're trying to not pull the reader out of the story.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
right.
That sounds like a great idea for a podcast next week.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'm just throwing that out there. So.
Did I see
all right.
one of you shuffle a script off of your desk just then?
All right. Okay. Well, I think we're good. I think we're good.
You're going to
here,
put this
so.
link up on the page, correct?
I am.
I
Yes.
just want to say thank you to everyone, and there's a lot of really good information on archetypes if you go on YouTube. There's a lot of really great interviews, and definitely it's something that I would recommend any writer to research a little bit more on, and then think about how archetypes are coming out in their own work.
I'm gonna
Very
let
good
Maya,
advice.
if you would maybe send me some of those links, either Facebook or Google or whatever it is. I'll try and put those in the show notes. So. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. You can get in touch with us as usual through Twitter at First in Fiction Podcast, or you can do at AD Gansky for me. You can find me on Facebook or at aarongansky.com. How about you, Steve?
You can find me at Steve McLean on Twitter, and you can also find my neglected blog at stevemclean.wordpress.com, which you can actually see right here on the bottom of the screen, right there, under my name.
Nicely
There.
done.
There you go.
How about you, Heather?
I'm easy to find. I'm on Facebook and Twitter. You can find the links to all those on my website, which is heatherluby.com. And the Citron Review, you can just Google the Citron Review, or it's thecitronreview.com.
Awesome. And Maya?
You can find me on Twitter at Cotillion Light, but because nobody can spell that or pronounce it, you can also go to my website, MayaGoode, that's MayaGoode.com.
And I'll put that on the show notes as well. So thank you all for listening, and until next week.
Good writing.